Penn State's head coaching board gets a little bit of a reset, and James Franklin, well, all signs point that he's going to go to Virginia Tech.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into another live show here on Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily source for all things Penn State sports. My name is Zach Seyko, and I'm your host of the show, credentialed media member for both Penn State football and Penn State wrestling. Formalities out of the way, this is more of a casual conversation. I have an agenda, which I can talk about, but I'm looking for your comments in the live chat. So I just followed up, or this is a follow-up to the Penn State-Michigan State postgame show, but this is a chance to just chat with all of you, get your comments, get your feedback, get your questions in, as I just want to interact with you. So let's sit back, relax, and just talk some college football. We'll go in any different direction. I'm going to focus on Penn State's head coaching search because that's what really matters in all of this. But you want to talk about Penn State, Michigan State, players that you would want to retain for next season that are currently on the roster. Which coach is your ideal target at this point? Is there somebody we're not talking about? Anything? Put it in the live chat. All right. But we'll start with, we'll continue with the fact that Mike Elko is going to stay in College Station. That's a big deal. That was Penn State's home run. That was a grand slam. That was everything. And that is why Penn State felt comfortable moving on from James Franklin in the middle of the season like that, because candidates like Mike Elko were out there, Kurt Cignetti, but Indiana took care of that. They took care of business immediately. And Matt Rule, I think Matt Rule was genuinely interested, but I think Pat Kraft politely told him that we're looking for a bigger name. It's a little disrespectful, but, and again, that's my opinion. I don't have any credibility to report that, but my opinion is that I think Matt Rule should have been absolutely interested in returning to his alma mater. But Pat Kraft and him are good friends since they work together. And I think he said, look, hey, I have to go with somebody that's going to be a bigger draw at the end of the day. So like I said, live chat, I want it to be active because I will get to your comments. I will get to your questions, and we'll go back and forth. So, all right, Will Stein. Why not Will Stein? I'd be perfectly fine with Will Stein. I haven't mentioned him as much because his name has been cool on this coaching search for whatever reason. Is it because of no connections to the Northeast? Does Penn State view him differently than other coordinators, right? It be him or Brian Hartline. I don't know that there's any other coordinators out there that qualify to be a head coach at Penn State right now. So it's either Brian Hartline, but I would consider Will Stein. He develops quarterbacks. I like that. That's a major plus. He's proven that he took Oregon's offense to a whole nother level and continues to keep them as high as they are. But just everything that I've heard, everything that I've read, there's not a substantial connection between Penn State and Will Stein. I keep pointing out in these conversations, believe nothing, consider everything. So maybe that's Penn State's trying to keep that under wraps. Because if information's out in the public, what good is it? I think that's kind of the leverage, which is why I'm just waiting for it. We'll talk about James Franklin to Virginia Tech here, but I look at this whole setup and I need to see it across the finish line before I'm going to say, okay, yeah, it's legitimate. I believe there are conversations. I believe there's mutual interest. But Florida State and Florida and LSU and Auburn, all of those jobs are more appealing to James Franklin. They are. And it's not a jab at Virginia Tech when I say that James Franklin is Virginia Tech's top choice, but Virginia Tech is not James Franklin's top choice. He's settling. And I don't think that's a long-term solution. I think James Franklin would be out of Blacksburg in 3 years if another job calls his name. So that's how I look at that. But we'll get the announcement supposedly tomorrow, right? That James Franklin's the next head coach of Virginia Tech. That's supposedly what's going to happen. But I've noticed that ESPN, On3, Yahoo Sports has some really good reporters, and they've been relatively quiet. It's been a lot of message board reporting on these, and again, I give them credit because their ears are to the ground. They're local. But if that's being reported and they have the same sources and connections, why aren't they relaying that to the up the food chain? Why isn't 24/7? I mean, this information's been out there for a month. Why aren't these larger outlets confirming that then? Because they have to wait until they cross their T's and dot their I's to report that. So it's fishy to me personally. Again, he very well may end up at Virginia Tech, but when I hear things like Jimmy Sexton's hitting up Auburn a time, he's interested in Florida State, he's waiting, he's stringing Virginia Tech along, whether that's to get more leverage from the university or because he's waiting for somebody else to open up. One way or another, he's stringing Virginia Tech along. He still may well end up there. It doesn't matter. Both of those things can be true. He can string Virginia Tech along and still end up as the next head coach there. Nobody really thinks we were going to take a winning head coach from a major program. Well, it depends how we define that, right? Mike Elko staying in Texas A&M, that was always going to be a tough, unlikely one. I kind of ballpark that as a 5 to 10% chance, but winning solves everything. But Texas A&M took an awfully long time to get that extension done. The word was, they believe in Mike Elko. They believe in him at Texas A&M. And then why wait? Because Indiana and Curt Cignetti, literally, 5 days after the Penn State job opened up and they got him an extension immediately? That conversation was over. Why, if Texas A&M is so confident in Mike Elko, but Mike Elko's waiting for more money. He was waiting for a better offer. Why are you lowballing him? There's all this oil money. You're not going to outbid Texas A&M. So then why is it an issue? Get him the appropriate contract extension and not waste time. Why did it take this long? Because you were worried that Penn State was going to poach your head coach. Indiana didn't want to leave that up to chance. There are a lot of coaches that are doing extension out there, but only 3 places. And again, it's finalizing a deal. An extension is not official. It's going to be now after he beat South Carolina today, the way that they did. But the fact that they waited this long and it's still, hey, they're negotiating. It's being finalized. It's in the process. I want to see have agreed to. Cignetti, Indiana, agreed to. Rule, Nebraska, agreed to. Brom, Louisville, agreed to. Brent Key, Georgia Tech, agreed to. None of that has happened other than those 2. And with what's trending with Mike Elko. Is Brian Daboll a realistic option? Yes, he is. Yes, he is. There's mutual interest. There's obviously going to be interest from Brian Daboll because he wants to be a head coach and he would be paid very well. I imagine that Penn State was paying James Franklin about $8 million with some incentive money as well. I think it added up in total to $8 million. I mean, Daboll would get a very nice contract now, but he hasn't proved it in college football. Is Penn State right to do that? If Daboll, I am not opposed to Brian Daboll being hired by Penn State because I think he gives you something different than James Franklin. You don't fire James Franklin in the middle of the season without changing course, changing direction. So it's not a safe hire because the range of results are all across the spectrum. That could be a total miss. That could be Bill Belichick. You're mediocre. You're at the bottom of the Big Ten. Or, Brian Daboll is a Northeast guy. The New York Giants are the New York Giants. He likes Penn State. think he has a daughter that goes to Penn State or has gone to Penn State. He has family ties to the university. He worked out in Buffalo. The reason he landed the Giants head coaching job was because he developed Josh Allen and set him. The idea was that, oh, Daboll's an offensive mastermind. He'll fix Daniel Jones. Okay. Well, Daniel Jones is better with the Indianapolis Colts, but that, that takes that's a completely different conversation. If you want me to get into Daniel Jones and the Indianapolis Colts, I am all for it. But Brian Daboll, did New York, he wasn't making all the decisions. I think, is it Joe Shane? I think that's how you pronounce his last name. Maybe it's Shane. I thought it was pronounced Shane. So, okay. The GM let Saquon Barkley walk. What role did Daboll play in that? Probably little to none. And to keep Daniel Jones, notice how quickly Jackson Dart became an immediate playmaker for them. So when he gets the right quarterback that fits in his system, he knows how to call the shots on offense. Okay, well then should he be an OC versus a head coach? Again, the guy can develop QBs. He has NFL experience. That's going to be a natural draw to Penn State that, oh, I want to go play under an NFL coach, and his connections, he's going to bring other NFL assistants to Penn State. I like the idea of NFL caliber coaches all coming together at Penn State. So I am not opposed to Brian Daboll, and I would be optimistic for that hire. The hires that would get my seal of approval, I'm skeptical of Eli Drinkwitz. And let me tease that. Let me save that because we do need to go to break. So when we come back, I'm going to let you know my ideal candidates. Brian Daboll is one of them. Which ones would say, yeah, Will Stein's another one that would get my seal of approval. I'll give you a few other names. That's coming up next here on this live edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. And this episode is brought to you by DoorDash. The weekend is here. Time to look back and crown this week's MVP on who delivered, powered by DoorDash. Just like you can win every Saturday with DoorDash Streaks, saving more every time you order, these players delivered when it mattered most. So let's break it down. For Penn State, Kaytron Allen. Kaytron Allen had 181 yards on 25 carries, 2 touchdowns. Oh, he certainly delivered a phenomenal performance. No hesitation, no delay. Kaytron Allen's just had a phenomenal season. This performance was not a fluke. We know that. And he's chasing after the all-time rushing record at Penn State. For it's 3,932 yards. Let's get Kaytron Allen to 4K, KA4K. Hashtag KA4K. And just like Kaytron Allen delivered for Penn State, DoorDash delivers your Saturdays with DoorDash Streaks. You save every Saturday you order. Stack it up all season long, and you could save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. Order this Saturday. Keep the streak alive. Fuel your game day only with DoorDash. Terms apply. Promo period through November 18th. Okay, thank you for joining me on a fan, listener, viewer-driven live show. So I'll give you the short list of names because, again, I want the live chat to contribute here. Brian Daboll is not my number one candidate, but I would like the hire. I would like Will Stein. I would like Brian Hartline a ton. Jeff Brom. Eli Drinkwitz. He's a good coach, but James Franklin helped elevate a Vanderbilt, and that was at a different time. No NIL, no transfer portal. He helped elevate Vanderbilt. I look at Eli Drinkwitz the same way, where he helped elevate Missouri. And I guess we're not going to see any comprehensive changes like the transfer portal's here, NIL is here. So Eli Drinkwitz has been able to succeed in this era. I feel like James Franklin has stepped back. Like the transfer portal and NIL, it's capped him where some coaches have benefited. James Franklin just has never been able to break through. So you see why, but I look at their body of work, and you elevate one of the lower tier schools in the SEC, but you still struggle in the big games. Whereas, okay, Jeff Brom, 3-1 against top 5 teams against Purdue, at Purdue. You beat Ohio State before Penn State did again. I just think about, okay, if Jeff Brom can win those kinds of games, what if you give him the resources, the war chest? you can help elevate him. I do like, I kind of like the idea of a homecoming for Bo Pribula to State College, but this search was framed as we want to win national titles. And my confidence level in Eli Drinkwitz to do that, that doesn't move the needle for me. Brian Daboll, I think just, again, wide range of outcomes, but also more outcomes here where he raises the bar for you. Same thing with Brian Hartline, Jeff Brom, obviously Mike Elko or Kalen DeBoer, even though those are the long shot candidates. Hey, Alabama lost today. Alabama fans are feisty. They make up your mind, because one week it's we lost to Florida State. I hate Kalen DeBoer. We need to move on from him. And then another week it's Penn State's never going to get him. Alabama's the mecca of college football. Who do you think you are? And it's okay. I would gladly. Kalen DeBoer is now since Mike Elko's off the coaching board, the home run hire above all else is Kalen DeBoer, if Penn State were somehow able to pull that off, because it doesn't seem like all things are well and good with Kalen DeBoer in Alabama. That's all I'm going to say. Just keep Terry Smith. Terry Smith, I want him on the next staff. There's not a timeline. See, I've thought about this. Keep Terry Smith. If you miss out on all your home run coaching hires, this would be a little disrespectful to Terry Smith. Would it be though? Again, this is just, like I said, this is a relaxed, chill conversation. I'm basically throwing ideas on a wall and seeing what sticks, right? So I've thought about it. Terry Smith, as just remove the interim label, make him the head coach and see how he does, with the intention that you are going to continue your coaching search for another year. The players like Terry Smith. They're fighting for him. He's a good recruiter. There are a lot of players that are there in State College because of him. Give him the keys. Let him drive the car. I'm not opposed to it. I think he would do well in 2026, but what would the staff look like? Are you going to retain Andy Kotelnicki? That doesn't sound great to everybody. You could, in theory, promote Ty Howell, but does it win you national championships, right? So the idea would be is that Terry Smith is still a bridge to get that premier head coach. So it doesn't work out this off season, but either A, you have Terry Smith succeed, and then it's like, okay, you proved it again. You might as well just keep doing this thing. I like that he's a Penn State alum. I like that he loves the university. I feel like James Franklin got away from that. It was more about him and the players, and not about him, the players, and the university and the fan base. Terry Smith bleeds blue and white. I like the idea of a head coach that has an allegiance to Penn State, that appreciates the university for what it is. I can confidently say that James Franklin did not feel that way. He didn't act like it. All these other coaches give a thank you memoir to all of their employers after they were fired. James Franklin didn't do that. Well, the fans didn't treat James Franklin the right way, and that's okay, to each their own. I like that Terry Smith has an appreciation for the university. I think that is huge. I think that helps. So you could keep Terry Smith, but the idea is that if you don't overwhelm, if you don't exceed expectations significantly, like 8-4 is not going to cut it. That team would need to make the playoff next season and contend for a title for me to say, yeah, Terry Smith's the guy going forward. So there is a timeline where I'm okay with Terry Smith as the full-time head coach, but it has to be, you really got to bat. You can't just bat 250, 300. You have to be leading. you have to really put the team above expectations there in that case. I would be okay with having someone like Manny Diaz if we can get a Will Stein type of offense in. If we could have a Will Stein type of coordinator in place on offense. Let me throw out some other names there. The thing with Manny Diaz is still, I like him more as a defensive coordinator than I do a head coach. He's doing okay at Duke. He didn't do that well at Miami of Florida. and he's a Florida guy. He also, I wonder what working relationship. I imagine that all is well because he was the defensive coordinator when Pat Kraft was at Penn State, right? He made that hire, but maybe most people don't know about this. Pat Kraft was the athletic director at Temple, and they had an agreement in principle, or I think he was hired. Like he was officially introduced at Temple as the next head coach, and then he took the Miami of Florida job instead. Ouch. So I wonder if that factors in for Pat Kraft at all. I know that was a long time ago, water on the bridge, bygones be bygones, and I'm not implying that Manny Diaz would do that. Again, that he would spurn Penn State or something like that. My point being is that how does Pat Kraft feel about his trust with the Manny Diaz in a prominent role like that again? Can he trust him? Can they work together cordially? I don't know. So we'll take another break and continue this conversation again. This is a listener, viewer driven show. We'll have more comments, more questions to address. That is all coming up next here on this live edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. And this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or you want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay for a shot and an even bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. And right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's right. $300 in bonus bets to new customers when your first $5 bet wins. So head over to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. And new customers will get $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. And again, I really appreciate each and every one of you. We're just hanging out on a Saturday night, talking Penn State football, talking college football. Let's see, what other results do we have here? Just want to check in on everybody. Oh, that is a close one. Florida just scored. Is Lane Kiffin going to go to Florida? I would continue to watch that one. Lane Kiffin to Florida. I would continue. Oh, I'm missing the Texas and Georgia game too. I'd rather be hanging out with all of you than watching the Texas and Georgia game, if I'm being honest. So I'd rather do this live show and talk to all of you. But what is that score? I glanced at it and then I looked away. Georgia 7, Texas 3. Good games. Utah destroying Baylor. Ohio State up on UCLA. Those are some top 25 games. Let me throw some other names out there that I like. I like Eric Morris a ton at North Texas. I am a massive Eric Morris fan. Helped develop Patrick Mahomes at Texas Tech. You want to talk about great high-flying offenses. He's turned a walk-on. I don't want to misrepresent the situation. He was either a lowly recruited or a walk-on quarterback, and he's a true freshman at North Texas. And the guy is slinging the rock. He is one of the best quarterbacks in college football. Eric Morris turned a no-name freshman into a household name in college football. I guess I should know his name, right? But okay, he turned him into a reliable quarterback. So I won't go that far that, he's one of the faces of college football. No, but North Texas is a lot of fun to watch. They put up 53 points today. They are 9-1. Yes, he is a household name. It's Drew Mestamaker. And Mestamaker, I mean, he's phenomenal this season. As a redshirt freshman, 69 completion percentage, 2,700 yards, 21 TDs to 4 interceptions. First time starter at North Texas. Oh, what good coaching can do for you. So just circle Eric Morris for college football's sake, because he's going to end up somewhere prominent. I like the idea of paying him, because would he take a step backwards at Penn State? The idea was that you take a veteran head coach and have Eric Morris, because this was even before the rumors about, like, my theory was Penn State should go in the direction of hiring Urban Meyer and then get Eric Morris to be the offensive coordinator and let Urban Meyer coach for 3 seasons or so, go back into retirement, and then Eric Morris takes over as the head coach in waiting. But you pay him a little more because he's making about $1.5 million right now as a head coach at North Texas. Pay him $2 million to come to Penn State and then have him be the head coach in waiting. Perfect setup. Well, but then the rumor is that Penn State doesn't even want Urban Meyer. I think that's hilarious. If that's the case, well, I guess it's not funny, because Urban Meyer's a really good coach, but he says he's not interested in getting back into coaching. And then there's rumors out there. I don't even know with that one. Urban Meyer and Penn State not seeing eye to eye on NIL and the transfer portal. If you can get the right setup, Penn State's a great institution. They can help elevate a lot of coaches. And so even with Eli Drinkwitz, I still think Eli Drinkwitz would have the appropriate resources. Again, does it raise the bar? Does it get you closer to a national title? Okay, so we're talking about message boards here because they cannot traffic in clickbait. They report actual news. Yes, we're talking about the bigger outlets. Insane cope on the Elko stuff. What's cope about it? He's staying in College Station. Penn State was in a position to make him say they made Texas A&M up the ante to keep them. Oregon fans won't push back on Stein leaving. He does less with more. I feel like my counterpart, Spencer McLaughlin at Locked On Ducks, would say differently. All the conversations that he and I have had is that Will Stein's a head coach in waiting. He does less with more. Is Dylan Gabriel, and Dylan Gabriel's not an NFL quarterback without Will Stein. Dante Moore is a college football cast-off without Will Stein. That's I don't know. We'll disagree on that one. Let's see. Coaching reset for Daboll. That would be a giant step backwards and a splat at the 50-yard line. I get it. Coming off of, but I'm willing to roll the dice. Okay, so everybody wants 9-3, 10-2. Maybe you sneak into the college football playoff. Is that what everybody wants? Because then what was the point of all of this? Why fire James Franklin? Because then if everyone's cool with status quo, you can't guarantee that Brian Daboll is going to be an awful hire. You don't know. Lane Kiffin was fired by the Oakland Raiders, and look where he's at now. Nick Saban, cast off from the NFL. Pete Carroll. Those guys are the exception, not the standard, but I am willing to roll the dice on a hire of Brian Daboll, because what if you give him, again, the New York Giants are the New York Giants. It just might not have been a fit at the end of the day. There are people, Buffalo Bills fans are saying, let's get Joe Brady out of here and go get Brian Daboll back as the offensive coordinator. So he's wanted somewhere. Hoping Drinkwitz wins out and we get Hartline. I think Brian Hartline would be, because again, he gives you something different. You would wide receiver recruiting, because I'm tired of mediocre play at wide receiver. And then by proxy, you would get quarterback recruits that are interested. And the NFL connections, the player development, all of that would be there with the Brian Hartline. The thing here, I should have mentioned this when talking about Will Stein. The thing with Brian Hartline and Will Stein is that they don't get a transfer portal window to open up with them. So it's going to be a struggle their first season, regardless, because what players are you going to get? That's why there's hesitation to hire a coordinator in the middle of a playoff run, because if you hire anybody, if you hire a head coach from somewhere else, the transfer portal opens It reopens. It's a micro portal window, and then those players can follow to Penn State. It doesn't matter if that's Bob Chesney. That doesn't matter if it's, in a perfect world, Kalen DeBoer, or name a head coach. Actually doesn't, and it doesn't do that with Brian Daboll. So you would need to make the hire before the transfer portal opens. But Brian Hartline would be a great hire. Just you have to find a way to do that strategically. You would need to do it before the transfer portal, or hope that Ohio State loses. And if they don't lose, if they make it to the semifinal, oh boy. See, there we go. We have some Bob Chesney fans in the chat. I'm good with I like the upside. I like the potential there with Bob Chesney. I said a while ago, now you would have to sift through a lot of episodes, but I loved when Indiana hired Curt Cignetti. It was because this is a Penn State show, so I'm not going to focus and be like, hey, here's a full show about why Indiana made the right choice with Curt Cignetti. But I've said on the record before, I love Curt Cignetti as a head coach. He was extremely successful at James Madison, and that was going to elevate Indiana. Look where they are now. Did I envision national titles? No. But definitely thought that was a really good hire for them. Okay, we can talk wrestling too. I know this is football talk, but how about the wrestling team last night? Blaze will be another Lightning Luke, and we haven't even seen PJ Duke yet. Shout out to wrestling. There will be plenty of coverage here about wrestling. PJ Duke, a little bit of load management since he just wrestled in a U20, a U23, and a senior level world tournament. The intention is to get him there for the Army Black Knight Invitational, which is just in a matter of weeks. So let's see, what else do we got? Appreciate all of you in the live chat. Really, this is great to have these conversations. Keep Jim Knowles. Get Brian Hartline. He already recruits the DMV in Pennsylvania. Outstanding. We need that. He's fiery. He's a motivator, and we don't want him to go somewhere else and explode. Bring Aller back with that offense. Okay. Let me. we got a full prompt here to respond to. That is a possibility. I am not. That has my seal of approval. Brian Hartline is the head coach. You keep Jim Knowles' defense continues. Again, it's a slow process, but it's a slow burn, but they're actually trending in the right direction. The defense continues to improve. They have their shortcomings, they have their struggles, but it also accounts for, you need to be able, the biggest issue with that is, again, the transfer portal and your roster construction. If you keep Jim Knowles, you would have to essentially start over that 2 to 3 year process of everybody learning his system, because you would bring in a ton of new players. You could, in theory, get some Ohio State players, maybe. Again, it's all about timing. It's timing with that one. But I am not against Hartline. He interviewed for the West Virginia job, so there is legitimate interest for him as a head coach. That's not just a Penn State thing. Brian Hartline, you would get Jim Knowles, get a veteran, experienced offensive play caller, and let Brian Hartline do what he does well, and let the rest of it, let everything else take care of itself. Maintain Terry Smith as a prominent defensive role. See, that's what's complicated with Terry Smith. Depending on what direction Penn State goes in, you might lose Terry Smith, because is Terry Smith going to take a demotion? He's the head coach. Why would he just go back to be a strong recruiting coordinator and be a defensive backs coach? Just something to consider. You know what? At what cost with all of this, right? At what cost? Hi, Mr. John. This was a big win indeed. I agree a ton. Daboll took the Giants to the playoffs once upon a time. It's not like he was an abject failure. I think the New York Giants failed him again. Let's let your star running back walk. Let's not give you a quarterback. And then when he does get his quarterback with Jackson Dart, would you look at how Jackson Dart looked like the future. And they're saying, nope, we don't want that. We don't want that at all. What is the timeline for Hartline if he came before the playoffs, after Michigan, after the playoffs? Would he leave in the middle of a playoff run? I would say no. Most Ohio State fans would agree with me. He's the offensive coordinator. He's calling plays. Would he leave in the middle of a playoff run? Probably not. So it'll be interesting the direction that Penn State goes in at this point in time. But I don't think here's my opinion. This coaching search is far from finalized. Far from finalized. If it ends up being Eli Drinkwitz at the end of November, like reports are in message board rumors are indicating, again, my source doesn't reach out to me if this isn't legitimate information to tell me Eli Drinkwitz is your guy. There's an agreement in place. There's like a verbal understanding that, hey, it's kind of like James Franklin, talks are substantial, but we need to see this get over across the finish line. That's going to be very underwhelming for me. I will, I am going to give Drinkwitz the benefit of the doubt. You get hopefully Bo Prabula. You get a lot of those good Missouri players. Again, they're all SEC caliber players. So you bring them to the Big Ten. At least Penn State in the short term won't be struggling. But again, long term, he's 1-10 in top 10 matchups. I need to see him prove it. He's not a Pennsylvania guy. He's not a Northeast guy. He can recruit somewhat well to Missouri. So I guess there's that. If he's able to recruit at Missouri, he should be able to recruit. State College Pennsylvania isn't for everybody. I'm not here to say that, oh, this is going to be easy recruiting. I've acknowledged that. It is difficult to recruit to Penn State. And James Franklin and that coaching staff did very well for the most part, especially with NIL and especially with the transfer portal. They did well for the most part. But again, everything was capped. Everything was capped. And the reason we got here to this point is because James Franklin, he picked the offensive coordinator. He picked the defensive coordinator. He made the choices with the transfer portal and the roster construction. He had everything he needed these past few seasons and failed miserably. Was it the expectations? Was it the pressure from, hey, the media right here, hi. Because I said this was national title or bust. And well, you're trying to hit 21. No, you busted. This truly was a national title or bust season, literally. So I was right when I said that. Was it harsh? Were the expectations through the roof? Yeah. But I was correct to say that I didn't think it would come to this. I didn't think we'd have a coaching search and Franklin would be let go in the middle of the season. What I thought it would do was it would put more pressure on Franklin going forward, that if you did have, because the worst case scenario in my mind was 8-4, you lose to Iowa, Indiana, Ohio State, and Oregon. You don't achieve any of your goals. You don't make the playoff. You don't, win anything. And what it meant going forward was no contract extension, no guarantees. You're on the hot seat. And if you don't get it done, if you don't shatter expectations in 2026, yeah, we're going to go in a different direction. But Pat Kraft said we're done in the middle of the year. Any other final comments here? Let's see if anybody else. Let's see. Landon did say that since he's been a long-time alum and hasn't gone anywhere, seems to want to be here. For Terry, we keep Kobe and also Mylan Graham, Bryson Rogers, likely with Heartline, maybe some analysts also. Okay. I imagine that's Landon Tangwall. And I think you're referring to the fact that, okay, Brian Hartline is a long time, reading comprehension here, so bear with me. So you're saying that, okay, because he is a long time, Brian Hartline's a long time alum, or Terry Smith is. You would have to find, there's, again, it's all about timing with Brian Hartline. It's a great hire if Ohio State bounces out of the playoffs, because you need to hit the transfer portal. I'm fine with compromising the class of 2026. So be it. You have the transfer portal, so you can fix whatever. Penn State will have no issues filling out a full roster, but it's who you fill out the roster with. If you have available roster, because people want to play at Penn State, people want to play in the Big Ten, it's not going to be difficult to attract talent. And it doesn't even need to be ex-Ohio State players or guys that never made the lineup at Ohio State, you are going to see the transfer portal just be the way it is, where it's going to be hectic. It's going to be crazy. And since there's only one window, it's going to be, we're talking insane. The levels are going to be off the charts because this is a new transfer portal type of window where it's 15 days, if I'm not mistaken, and it's just the one. So you got to make your decision now, and you get one chance at this. You don't get to transfer in, go through the spring football season, and then, I'll reconsider, or I'll go somewhere else. We saw that a couple of times. Remember Storm Duck, everybody? That's a name. Storm, I just popped in my mind. Remember when Storm Duck transferred in, didn't get the starting role, and then transferred out to Louisville? Nothing like that. You're in. When you're in the portal and you commit somewhere else, you're there for the season. We'll see how that works out for everybody else. I like it because then it's less crazy. You trying because you need your roster established. I believe the next season starts with spring football. That's not the end of this season. That's the beginning of next. It's timing with Brian Hartline. If you can get him before the transfer portal opens, then the transfer portal opens, he gets to recruit and fill out the roster. But if he goes through a deep playoff run, you hire him. You can't wait on him. Ohio State has to just fall off course. They have to lose early if you're going to make that move. I think Brian Hartline, he's worth waiting out to an extent. At the end of the day, I mean, I'd rather go with somebody else at that point. It was different with Mike Elko because, again, if you wait out his season, say they lose in the quarterfinals or the semifinals, and Elko still doesn't have his extension, he's interested in Penn State, then you roll with that. And you can wait because you get that micro transfer portal window where all those Texas A&M players are just going to follow to Penn State. So my Irish set the clock in motion. What does that mean? Am I missing another comment here? Let's see. Eli is a mirror image of Franklin, just wouldn't be worth the firing. I think Penn State fans' biggest concern is that you would get stuck with Eli Drinkwitz for 10, 12, 15 years, and it would just be more of the same. Again, I don't want more of the same. Or else Penn State would have kept James Franklin, where you're good, but you're not good enough. I am okay if Brian Daboll or Brian Hartline being risky hires because they have no experience in college football. And Daboll was fired by the New York Giants. So what good is he? I'm willing to take on the risk that you'll get potentially a 4-6 or a 3-9 season right out of the gate, just so long as he gets you to 11-1 and closer to Ohio State, because that's what we're talking about here. It's about winning Big Ten conference titles. It's about being at the top consistently. I'm okay with a slow start, but a strong finish in that case. You have to go with somebody that has upside. You can't just say, well, we fired James Franklin, so here, we'll take somebody that's just mid-tier. No. You have to go with someone that gives you significant upside. Hartline does that. Daboll does that. I think Bob Chesney can do that. Who else? Because I always miss a name. Jeff Brom. Again, Jeff Brom losing to Clemson. You just don't fire James Franklin if you're going to make an underwhelming move, right? You just don't. Let's see. Here's my question. Why are these coaches still getting buyouts in the contracts? What other job can you fail and get a salary for the next 6 years? It is insane. People want stability, right? Notice how, because then you would lose your job instantaneously. Mike Norvell, the reason Florida State continues to just kind of kick the can down the road. Luke Fickell as well. They would just move on because there's a financial incentive, right? Penn State kind of took the chance that we're going to have to pay $50 million to James Franklin. We don't know if he's going to get another job, but Penn State would rather pony up $50 million than have James Franklin as the head coach. That's awful to hire an NFL coach with no college experience. Daboll doesn't have the personality to recruit top talent. He has the credentials. Being an NFL coach carries a lot of weight. That has a lot of cachet. Again, I will point out Lane Kiffin, Pete Carroll, Nick Saban all failed initially in the NFL. Came to college and look what they did. You don't know until you know. And Brian Daboll just might not have fit with the Big Apple. Right? It just might not have been a good fit with the New York Giants. But he lands that job because of how successful he was with developing Josh Allen and working with the Buffalo Bills. And, well, he can't recruit. You build a staff around him. He doesn't have to do all the recruiting. He doesn't have to be the guy that goes knocking on doors. You build a staff around him, and maybe that's Terry Smith's job. Maybe Terry Smith is still that, your right-hand man, second in command. If Brian Daboll's willing to agree with that, he should. If he wants to succeed at Penn State, you have Terry Smith as your go-to guy. He's your recruiting coordinator / associate head coach, and that's a win-win there. So there are things you can do to offset those things. It's the same thing. Well, Brian Hartline hasn't been a head coach. Okay, then go get people with lots of experience to build around him and let him do what he does well. Let's see here. I see a lot of enthusiasm here. You may be okay with that, Zach, but our armchair coach fan base isn't. They want Cale Sanderson results. No, you make a good point. But that's how you get Cale Sanderson results. Okay, was Cale Sanderson winning national titles at Iowa State? Could you bring him up? No, you have to. Pat Kraft is having conversations that we're never even going to hear remotely a word about. Again, rumors that were Urban Meyer. You didn't have the confidence in Urban Meyer to coach and lead this program. That's a rumor. Can't confirm it, can't deny it, but it's out there that Penn State said, whoa, Urban Meyer's not a good fit. Brian Daboll might have a vision for this program that we don't know about. Same thing with that Brent Key. I guess I haven't mentioned Brent Key enough until he signs an extension. Is he that kind of caliber of coach? And we want to bring up Cale Sanderson. Cale Sanderson left his alma mater with the promise that you are going to fulfill your vision here. Maybe Brent Key has that. Maybe Jeff Brom has that, right? Those are kind of comparable when you bring up the Cale Sanderson idea of a guy leaving his alma mater to take a step forward. If you're going to swing for the fences, you might strike out. Do not go with the safe hire. If anybody else, again, continue to add your thoughts in the live chat with this. You can fire the guy if it doesn't work out. If you realize after 3 to 4 years, this guy's not getting us where we need to go. Okay, now you know, and you can do it all over. I get people don't want to be stuck in that cycle. Texas A&M. Hey, what about Oregon? Oregon went with Dan Lanning, but they weren't getting any closer with Mario Cristobal. Oregon was irrelevant for 10 years? They went to a national title with Chip Kelly. Chip Kelly goes to the NFL. I want somebody that's going to appreciate Penn State, that's going to be there for the long haul. 15, 20, this is their destination job. Not somebody that's looking to use Penn State as a stepping stone to get to the NFL. So if you find out, or if you can read the tea leaves and say, oh, Brian Daboll's just using Penn State as, again, a stepping stone, and he's not going to be here for 15, 20, 25 years, right? Penn State's a destination job. So I don't want a coach that I have to worry about, if I'm Pat Kraft, being poached by a, so to speak, larger program, or return to the NFL, or go to the NFL. Notre Dame should be worried. There is legit interest from the New York Giants about hiring Marcus Freeman away from Notre Dame. And it's not just the New York Giants. I know that there's at least interest. How substantial that interest is, and is Marcus Freeman reciprocating? Again, No extensions have been signed. So until I see so-and-so has agreed to terms with so-and-so, nobody's staying put at their, you can believe and you can assume and you can say, but remember, Lincoln Riley left Oklahoma for USC, and now Lincoln Riley's apparently rumored to be interested in another place. What does that look, right? Would Lincoln Riley go to LSU? And then what does that do? USC is now on the market. Who is USC going to target? I think this coaching carousel gets crazier before it slows down. I don't think this is slowing down at all. This is what I mean. Okay, so I open up X because I don't want to miss anything, any updates that I don't want to miss any breaking news that, hey, Elko, the extension's official, anybody else. But there's right out of the gate, the first thing that pops up on my feed: send Daboll and all of his belongings and all of his family on the next flight to Happy Valley. Please do it. Please, Alabama, please fire Kalen DeBoer. Please do not offer him any incentives because he's got a nice contract. It's a 10-year, $10 million per year contract. It's really nice. Buy him out of his contract and send him to Penn State, please. Kalen DeBoer took Washington to a national title. The dude knows how to coach. He wins everywhere he goes. And Alabama, oh, well, he was 9-3 with a makeshift team in year one. Didn't have all of his coaches. And again, Jalen Milroe wasn't his guy. Then in year two, okay, they lost to Florida State. Losing to Florida State is inexplicable to an extent. Like, it's unacceptable to an extent. That was an Alabama team that is full of redshirt freshmen, redshirt sophomores that Kalen DeBoer is still getting situated. I had Alabama making a deep playoff run this year because everybody told me that Alabama team on paper is the most talented. They just need to continue to play ball. Put Kalen DeBoer on a plane to Penn State and start negotiating, please. I am all for it. Alabama fans just don't. They're stuck in the Nick Saban days. So, Kalen DeBoer, welcome to Penn State. If Alabama wants to push him out, I'm all for it. So, good point. I imagine in regard to, I think that's a follow-up to what, Daboll, or just my point about Brian Hartline. Just, you can build a staff around him. You have like no limits for staff anymore. Remember what? It was like 5 years ago or something where analysts could only talk to players on Wednesday or something like that. And you had staff limitations. You had recruiting limitations with how many staff members you can have. Go and get anybody and everybody you need to work for Hartline, for Daboll, for Eli Drinkwitz. Give him the assets that he needs. Okay, figure out what his strengths are, and then go get the complementary pieces to make him better. If Drinkwitz needs an outstanding offensive coordinator or needs an A+ defensive coordinator, I don't know, something, or needs a quarterbacks coach, right? To bridge the gap, find that, get that. You have to make it work. You can't just say, all right, we're going to hire you. We're going to bring you in and just do whatever. Have a blueprint. Yeah, Alabama lost to Oklahoma. Again, that doesn't make me more skeptical. It makes me more skeptical about Alabama. Because if Alabama wants to throw Kalen DeBoer out the door, then all right. Because that was one of the initial rumors. And shout out to fellow Penn State grad Heather Dinich, because social media dragged her for saying this. But other message board rumors, so to speak, confirm it, that not everything is perfect between Alabama and Kalen DeBoer and his family. The word on the street is that Kalen DeBoer and his family just aren't enamored with Alabama. They just they thought it was going to be different. And it's been somewhat of a culture shock for them. So it's just not a fit, even though he's winning still. Why is, I don't understand why Alabama would write, I would rather Penn State be one loss in conference. We're over here 4-6, and Alabama still has a chance to make an SEC championship, win an SEC championship, and get to the college football playoff. They're in the driver's seat. They're going to play Georgia. If everything goes well, they're going to play Georgia in the SEC championship. They would play Texas A&M. They would play Texas A&M. They hold the tiebreaker because they beat Georgia. They only have the one loss to Oklahoma. That's not ideal. It's not good, but let's not pretend like Oklahoma just knocked out Alabama fans, within respect, right? I'm not going to speak for all of them. That is one message board commentator, one of the top comments saying, get Kalen DeBoer and send him to Happy Valley. Let's not overreact to that. That's a small portion of the fan base that is probably being unreasonable and saying, because they don't like Kalen DeBoer. Okay. There were people like that with Joe Paterno during the entire James Franklin tenure. You watch back a lot of my episodes. I went to bat for James Franklin. And then once I finally got my answer that this guy's not going to take Penn State further, it's like you had to move on. It's like when sitting back and looking at it, he finally got everything. He got his OC. You got your offensive coordinator in Kotelnicki. That was your choice. You were responsible for that. You got Jim Knowles. You convinced Pat Kraft and the board to hire Jim Knowles for $3+ million. That's on you. You got the donors to invest in NIL, to retain Drew Aller at a pretty penny, Nicholas Singleton, Katron Allen, the entire offensive line, deny Dennis Sutton, Zane Durant, go get Amari Campbell in the transfer portal, go get Trevor Pena in the transfer portal. This is what I mean, is that you had everything at your disposal to make the team as best as possible. And it was a complete failure. And that's how you knew that when you increased Penn State, Pat Kraft increased James Franklin's leverage, and they did worse. More comments coming in. Anyone but Brian Kelly. Okay, so chat, this is between us. I had a source tell me the other day that there's limited context here, but Brian Kelly, whether it's Penn State and Brian Kelly are mutually interested, or Brian Kelly and his team reached out to Penn State to gauge interest, all I know is that I had a source is not going to reach out to me unless there is something substantial there. So Eli Drinkwitz being the leading candidate, that very well might be true. Doesn't mean he's going to be hired, but that's probably true. Brian Kelly and Penn State had a conversation of some sort. Same thing with Michigan State. I don't want to leave Michigan State in because Brian Kelly is trying to get a head coaching job. Who reached out to who? I can't say. I don't have all the context there. But Brian Kelly and Penn State had a phone call about the head coaching job, say it per my source, and the same thing with Michigan State. Brian Kelly and Michigan State is apparently really interested in Brian Kelly, or they're interested in another head coach because Jonathan Smith isn't working out. I think they just want to start over. I know. See, I like this. We're getting back to the short-term results instead of trying to figure out who Penn State's next head coach is going to be. Will Penn State go to a bowl game if they're 6-6? Okay, so you're asking. See, I hope so. I don't blame them if they do, though. If they don't, meaning that they declined the invitation. But it seems like most of those guys want to play ball. See, here's the thing, though. With how many seniors are on this team, at some point, are they just going to say, like, hey, we went through the 12-game schedule. There's been so many bowl opt-outs in recent memory. Do you really want to, right? You're not playing for the Peach Bowl. You're not playing for, maybe you get the Pop-Tarts Bowl, right? It's 6. See, the Pop-Tarts Bowl might be too good for Penn State. I shouldn't say that. We're talking Pinstripe Bowl, maybe the Duke's Mayo Bowl for Penn State. Would they accept that invitation? I would hope so, but they might not have a team. If say all the seniors opt out, I would hope that's not the case. But I'd give it a 50-50 chance that Penn State doesn't accept a bowl invite if they get to 6-6. I think they get to 6-6. I think they beat Nebraska. I think they beat Rutgers. They're better than both of those teams. But would they decline a potential bowl invite? Absolutely. That's definitely on the table with where Penn State is right now. Yep, it looks likely with the remaining schedule. Never really impressed with Drew Aller. Aller fell short of it. It has to do a lot with expectations. I think if he came in as a 3-star or a 4-star, things would be different, but he was supposed to be the QB savior. He was supposed to right the wrongs of Christian Hackenberg. He was supposed to right the wrongs of quarterback development at Penn State, and unfortunately fell in line with it. And I feel bad for Drew Aller. I wish he never got hurt. It's just bad, unfortunate circumstances. I think he can succeed in the NFL. Someone's going to take a chance on him. He's going to get drafted. He'll be cleared. CBS reported today he'll be cleared in January for his injury, which means he'll go to the combine. He'll have a pro day. NFL scouts will be enamored with him throwing against air. And I think he'll get with respect to, I think he will get somewhat of the Zach Wilson treatment. That doesn't mean he's going to be a number 2 overall pick. It means that his draft stock is going to rise significantly to a point where I think he's going to be drafted over his expectation. So right now, most people will probably view Drew as a day 3 pick. It would not shock me if he goes in round 2 or round 3 if he impresses at the combine, which he will. So if Aller's taken in round 2, or if he's a day 2 NFL draft pick, do not be surprised if everything goes well. Alabama is already getting on Kalen DeBoer's nerves. I'm calling it. Kalen DeBoer is the fish that Penn State is getting because he's going to exit Alabama. I love it. Half the battle is believing, folks. Believe and you shall receive. Kalen DeBoer. I'm all for it. I hope that Penn State, here's the thing with Penn State. They are willing to wait it out. They're willing to wait it out because the backup plan is we'll let Terry Smith do this. And I said that earlier in this live show. If you're just joining me for this impromptu, again, this is just, we're chatting. I don't have an agenda. We'll talk about Kalen DeBoer and what he'd do for Penn State for all I care. But the backup plan, which I'm cool with, because then you just go again. Just go again. You have the transfer portal. It is not, you don't have to go through a 5-year rebuild anymore. That was the thing about college football. If you move on from a head coach, you sacrifice the next 4 or 5 years because you got to build through recruiting and reestablish that. Just play free agency the next season. So, and then Kalen DeBoer will get players to follow him. Here's the thing with, because I listened to Locked On SEC and stuff like that. And they were focusing on particularly in the off season of how Kalen DeBoer was not recruiting enough in Alabama. So you have a lot of players that are from other parts of the country. And I'm not saying everybody would take a one-way ticket to State College, but those players are there for Kalen DeBoer. They're not there necessarily for Alabama. They might be. They might be there because they like Tuscaloosa and everything else. But they are also there in part because Kalen DeBoer went and recruited them. Those players would follow a good portion of them. I think it's reasonable to believe that they would follow him to Penn State or another job. No, I'm not on board with Brian Kelly. I'm just telling you what I hear. I try not to gatekeep. I have nothing to gatekeep. If I have a source that says XYZ, I will tell all of you. Brian Kelly and Penn State had a conversation. Brian Kelly and Michigan State had a conversation. What other context there is, I can't confirm, but that's all I know. I don't want Brian Kelly. I don't think that would be a good hire for Penn State. And then I did address the other half of your comment. Wait for Kalen and drop the bag for Hartline. You don't need to drop he's making $1 to $2 million right now at Ohio State. Anything would be a pay raise. Penn State would probably offer him $5 to $6 million with incentive based, and then the promise of an extension if you succeed. I'm not sure if we're getting a better coach than James Franklin. To be determined. It's 50-50 because Kalen DeBoer is a better head coach than James Franklin. You don't know with Brian Daboll. Most people are going to say he failed in the NFL, so you don't know. My point about this coaching search is always going to be, bottom line, get a head coach that is different. Get somebody that's different. So get an NFL coach. Get somebody that is a wild card of a coordinator. Will Stein, Brian Hartline, because you get something different. Eli Drinkwitz, again, I know, and I know there's probably new viewers here in this, so I'm rehashing it for some. It's the first time this is going to land for the new viewers. When you hire one of these guys, you are getting something different. When it comes to Eli Drinkwitz, again, elevated. It's very similar to James Franklin. He elevated Vanderbilt. Drinkwitz elevated Missouri. Again, the bottom feeders, the lower tier of the SEC, because that's the idea, is that, oh, this guy elevated Vandy. This guy elevated Missouri. Surely he can do that at Penn State. And James Franklin did. He did elevate Penn State, but to a point. Okay? Does Drinkwitz do that? Does he elevate Penn State past its bar? And I don't think he does. I think he's a good coach. He's shown that he can recruit Pennsylvania quarterbacks for what it's worth. Bo Pribula, Matt Zollers, Gavin Sidwar, right? He's shown that he can recruit, and Penn State should have had Matt Zollers, but nope, went to Missouri. So I guess there's that. But if Drinkwitz was a Penn State alum, if he had connections to the Northeast, he's from Oklahoma. He's from Oklahoma, if I'm not mistaken. But what about Kalen DeBoer? Kalen DeBoer, I call him kind of the mercenary of college football in a way, because he doesn't have any allegiances anywhere. Let me look up Kalen DeBoer so I can because I want to relay that correctly. Yeah, he's on Penn State's coaching board. I'm not saying it's the likely candidate. This is still, I would ballpark it at 5 to 10% of it happening, probably closer to 5, because again, he's a good coach. He's from South Dakota. I don't think he's returning to his home state anytime soon. He's not making a return to Sioux Falls or South Dakota or North Dakota. But Kalen, so he doesn't have an allegiance to anybody. He's not an Alabama grad. He's not a Florida grad. He's not an LSU grad. He's not a USC grad. You don't have to worry about, oh, well, he might return to his alma mater. He's not a Notre Dame grad, right? Those are the schools that are comparable, or again, I'm not afraid to admit universities that are better suited in this age of college football than Penn State. Penn State's a top 10 job, but Ohio State's better, Notre Dame's better, Michigan's better. Who else am I missing? Texas is definitely better. Texas A&M, supposedly, right? Let's see, who else would be? And this is in terms of finances, right? It's to each their own. If you find a good coach that fits in central Pennsylvania, not every coach is going to work out. You need, clearly, you need a specific fit at LSU to succeed. Clearly, you need a specific fit at Florida to succeed. It's not a one size fits all with some of these, even these prominent coaching jobs. Texas is the Ohio State and Texas are the 1A and 1B of college football. And look how long it's taken them to recover from, is Mac Brown? I'm blanking on names again, guys. Yes, Mac Brown. Do you see how they haven't returned to college football prominence? Oh, but they made the semifinal. They haven't won a national title. And look how long it took for them just to get back to being an elite top tier program until they hired Steve Sarkisian. It's not easy. So even the most prominent jobs, take Texas A&M. It wasn't until Mike Elko that this team gets past 8-4, 9-3. Johnny Manziel is fun. He's fun to watch. He'll win a Heisman, but we're not making a college football championship now. It's a specific fit. So if Brian Daboll fits in, great. because that's half the battle. Maybe Eli Drinkwitz does fit in, and that's why there's all this steam with, I have sources telling me, again, Drinkwitz is the presumed leader. Other people are telling On3 24/7 for the Penn State coverage the same thing. Their sources are saying the same thing, that, yeah, as of right now, Eli Drinkwitz is the supposed leader. It doesn't mean he's going to be hired, but it means that right now, in the scheme of things, this is your most realistic candidate. So maybe Drinkwitz is having great conversations with Penn State, and Penn State likes what they're hearing. But they've also interviewed Brent Key. Jeff Brom is still out there. He hasn't signed an extension with Louisville. Brian Daboll has interest from Penn State. Kalen DeBoer certainly has interest from Penn State. Marcus Freeman, not a likely candidate, but until he tells Penn State no, Penn State's going to think that, okay, you're on our list. You're on our coaching board until you tell us no. So Penn State's willing to wait at the end of the day. Why would Brian Kelly be a serious candidate? He's not. I'm just saying there was just a phone call. There was a connection made. I don't have context. Did Penn State reach out to him? Cannot confirm. Did Kelly reach out to Penn State? More so likely, but cannot confirm. I just know there was a conversation between Penn State and Brian Kelly. That's what I can tell you. Penn State outsider here, still a fan. LOL. How much confidence does the Penn State fan base have for Kraft to make the correct call for the head coaching job? I mean, it's not just Kraft, right? You also had to get the board. You had to get the board on board to move on from James Franklin and to commit $50 million potentially to getting him out. So Pat Kraft knows that this is a job. I like that. I just like the risk. I like that Pat Kraft really said, I'm going to roll the dice with my job and go get a national title to Penn State. That's what I mean. Pat Kraft, I like people in this institution that are willing to fight for Penn State University. Terry Smith checks that box. I would hope the next football coach checks that box. I know that Mike Rhodes isn't succeeding at this very moment, but he's willing to fight. Cale Sanderson. These people, these coaches that Pat Kraft is getting at the very minimum, and I know he didn't go and get Sanderson. I understand that. But guys that just fight, coaches that just fight for Guy Godowski, fighting for this program on a day-by-day basis. You want somebody that's going to want to be at Penn State. And I've said that about James Franklin, that I don't think he wanted to be at Penn State anymore. Just for whatever reason. The fan base was too rabid. The expectations were too high. Didn't have enough job security. Just had grown tired of it. He wasn't a Penn State guy at heart. And if you weren't going to develop that over a decade of being there, you weren't going to get that ever. You weren't going to get that from him. Cale Sanderson is an Iowa State guy. He graduated from there, but now he's a Penn State guy, right? That's what I'm looking for in this coaching search. Somebody that's going to potentially raise the bar. It could also be a complete failure. But Pat Kraft is willing to risk his job, because if he messes up this hire, then he gets fired at the end of the day. And I like that he's being risky. Daboll is not getting the job. They already passed on him. Okay, so if that's the case, then so be it. Then he's not a realistic candidate. I don't want Heartline. This dude is going to be here at Penn State short term until Ohio State opens. I mean, Ryan Day's young. Ryan Day's not going anywhere. But maybe the NFL. The Bears were interested in him once upon a time. No, that's interesting if Daboll's not a candidate at all. They're not even going to have an interview or anything like that. A coach who fights for the program, who isn't a flashy hire, could end up being really good. You just need to find somebody that's going to work out for Penn State. It doesn't need to be the best overall. It doesn't need to be the best. It needs to be the best hire for Penn State, not the best overall hire, the best hire for Penn State. If Eli Drinkwitz checks those boxes and I'm wrong about that, then so be it. Maybe that's Jeff Brom. Maybe that's Brent Key. Only Pat Kraft and them are going to know for sure. What am I hearing about Lincoln Riley, Lane Kiffin, Brent Venables at Oklahoma? So it sounds like, I mean, Venables is coaching for his job. So it sounds like he's safe. You know, if you're going to go on the road and beat Alabama and Tuscaloosa, that's going to cure a lot of things. Lane Kiffin and Florida just continue to seem like, and I want to check in on that score again. Let's see here. Oh, Texas. Oh, Florida's beating Ole Miss 24-20. Not saying that result's going to, I thought Florida would cover this game. I thought Florida would cover. I just had a hunch today. Yep. Florida had a 2-touchdown underdog. I thought that game would be give or take 31-20, something like that. But no, they're putting up some points. Good for them. Florida really wants Lane Kiffin. That's what I've always kind of heard. I've heard that from my counterpart at Locked On Gators, that this was even before Billy. I don't have a recent update, but what I can say is my counterpart over at Locked On Gators has always said that Florida and their board, they've always been, it's been Lane Kiffin 24/7, even when Billy Napier was there in year 1, year 2. They wanted Lane Kiffin forever. LSU, same thing. They want Lane Kiffin. In regards to Lincoln Riley, just again, I'm losing my voice here. So I'm gonna wrap up here in just a moment. I'll get some of these final comments in, but watch Lincoln Riley at USC in respect to LSU. Watch Lane Kiffin with LSU, and this is just kind of listening to other people and reading different things. I don't have a source that's communicating to me, oh, by the way, Lane Kiffin. I mean, apparently Nick Saban's the favorite to land at LSU to come out of retirement. But I would watch Lincoln Riley leaving USC potentially for LSU. I would watch Lane Kiffin to Florida. I think Brent Venables is going to stay at Oklahoma. That's my opinion. If Pat Kraft, yeah. If you're going to put your job on the line, you wait out Kalen DeBoer. Yeah, absolutely. We need a QB developer and haven't had one of those on staff in decades. Joe Moorhead was pretty good. I thought Joe Moorhead elevated Trace McSorley. Again, it helps when you have Saquon Barkley, Mike Gesicki, Chris Godwin. I get all of that. But he helped make Trace McSorley into what he was. I thought Joe Moorhead was one of the better. Ricky Ronnie was a pretty good offensive coordinator, quarterbacks coach. Here's the one thing I did question about Andy Kotelnicki's hire is that he was the offensive coordinator only. He was the play caller only. I do think that your offensive coordinator should also double as the QB's coach. Nothing else. No more, no less. This guy's your QB's coach as well. And yes, Kotelnicki worked with the quarterbacks, but you need a QB guru. Will Stein is that with Oregon. Joe Moorhead was that at Penn State. Having your OC be your main quarterback whisperer is the blueprint. Why not Bob Chesney? If you're tuning in late, I've mentioned him in and out of this conversation. I'm good with that hire, actually. Okay, see, yeah, nope. Thanks for tuning in. Appreciate it. I would take in a particular order. Kalen DeBoer, number 1, first and foremost. If Alabama wants to push him out, gladly take him. Kalen DeBoer is your home run guy. He took Washington to a national title and beat Dan Lanning in that Oregon team multiple times. Give me Kalen DeBoer. All else, I'd be good with Brent Key. I would be good with Jeff Brom. I would be good with Brian Hartline. I would be good. Now, I know we had one commenter say that Daboll, here it is, Daboll is not getting the job. They already had that conversation. If that's the case, so be it. If Penn State is actually considering him, I wouldn't be against it again. NFL coach, NFL connections, NFL ties. He helped develop Josh Allen. There's a lot to like there. Build around him. Okay. Just give him the recruiting staff because, how is he going to be able to recruit? Give him the staff that helps him recruit. What about Alex Golish? He lost today. And apparently that was somebody that Penn State had interviewed. That was another message board rumor that Alex Golesh had interviewed for and quietly put himself in the top 3 conversation. The top 3 about a week ago was Eli Drinkwitz, Jeff Brom, and Alex Golesh. Where that stands now, to be determined. It changes every day. Would I be okay with Terry Smith? Yes. With the intention that, okay, so I'll explain again. Terry Smith has shown that he's not afraid of the spotlight. He can thrive. And I like that he's a Penn State alum. I've said that countless times, that a Penn State alum or somebody that has an allegiance to Penn State is a major plus. Terry Smith, but here's what I would need from Terry Smith. You have proven to me that you can manage this kind of program. You are a phenomenal recruiter. A lot of the reason that Penn State has the pipeline from Pittsburgh is because of Terry Smith. Terry Smith is a great recruiter. But what does that mean for the staff? Andy Kotelnicki, right? Is Penn State going to keep everything? Are we worried about, because you would need to keep some of the staff together for the most part. That would mean that if Terry Smith's going to be the head coach, how does everybody feel about Andy Kotelnicki, Jim Knowles, Danny O'Brien, Marcus Hagans, right? Would any of them follow James Franklin of Virginia Tech? And most people would probably say, yep, good riddance, go ahead. So how would Terry Smith build out that staff? Who would help him do that? Would Anthony Poindexter stick around? I feel like Anthony Poindexter is somebody that would probably look for another job. Same thing with Phil Troutwine, because they're not Penn State guys. You would have Deion Barnes. You would have Dan Connor. Okay, that's a great start. You would have to promote Ty Howell. With Terry Smith, Terry Smith basically gets a 1-year trial. He gets a 1-year test. If I'm Pat Kraft, say, all right, we didn't get our home run hire. We didn't get our home run hire. Terry Smith, we're going to go with you. We're going to remove the interim label. You need to shatter expectations. And that's the thing. Steve Jones, he's the voice of Penn State football. Most people probably know that. And I've had a working relation. When I worked at the radio station in State College, I worked with Steve. He always talked about this in regard to NFL draft picks. If you're in the first or second round, you basically get a bunch of time. You get a bunch of tries to mess up. You're never going to be pushed out of the league. Someone would always say, oh, well, you were a first round pick, so you just don't have to prove as much. If you're a 5th, 6th, 7th round undrafted free agent, you are fighting for your career every single day until you get to that 3rd contract. It is prove it every single day. That would be the same case with Terry Smith. He was coaching high school before he joined Penn State. He wasn't coaching. He didn't have all these other stops at all these other different universities. Let me confirm that too before I go on the record with that. Let's see, because I thought he was at, okay, he coached at Temple for a season. He was at Hemphill High School as an assistant. He was the PGC passing game coordinator at Duquesne. And then he was the OC and then the head coach at Gateway High School, which is his alma mater. Then he was the wide receivers coach at Temple for a season. And then Penn State and James Franklin hired him to be the cornerbacks coach, the assistant head coach, the associate head coach, and now he's the interim head coach. So in regard to Terry Smith, if he's going to be the head coach, it means he knows that this is a 1-year trial, that you have to shatter expectations. That means you're going to the college football playoff, you're winning games that you're not supposed to. And if you don't, with Penn State, it's somewhat disrespectful, but it's also kind of, again, it's where the territory is. Terry Smith is not this long tenured head coach. So he doesn't get that many tries to make mistakes. If you're going to go with Terry Smith, it's on a year-by-year basis, essentially. And you have to prove all that you can handle this. It means going 11-1 in your first year. It means making the college football playoff, because if you go 10-2, you probably get in. So I won't even say, oh, you have to go undefeated, you have to go 11-1. It means you make the college football playoff. Expectations are high, but Penn State's got to make sure that, okay, then you're the guy. Prove it. Prove that you're the guy. He's done that to this point, because right here, again, appreciate the comments. This is why we're having this conversation. Terry Smith is 1-3 as a head coach. Okay. He's thrown into the fire against Iowa on the road with a first-time starting quarterback. If Drew Aller plays in that game, they beat Iowa. Ethan Grunkemeyer is in his first career start against a top 5 defense at Kinnick Stadium. Then they go on the road and face number 1 Ohio State with a first-time starting quarterback. Then they face number 2 Indiana, and they nearly upset number 2 Indiana. And then they beat Michigan State decisively. Terry Smith has my attention. I'm cautiously okay with him being the head coach, but it really has to be, you got to prove it. And we're going to be hiring and continuing. We're going to be continuing this process until you give us a reason not to look for a coach. That's how a Terry Smith head coaching tenure, full-time head coaching tenure at Penn State would need to be. And then what do you do with the staff? Because I see right here, fire Andy, fire Danny O'Brien, fire Marcus Hagans. Who do you go get? Do you make Trace McSorley the full-time quarterbacks coach? I don't know. I don't know if that's the right answer. You find a way to keep Ty Howell. Do you make him the offensive coordinator? You want to also set Terry Smith up for success. I don't want him to take the head coaching job in theory just to take the head coaching job. I want him to be set up for success. I think, did somebody say Joe Moorhead in the chat? Let's see here. I thought somebody said I thought I read hire Joe Moorhead to be the offensive coordinator. Maybe I missed that. I'm going crazy. I've been doing this. I've been doing this for an hour and a half. This is for you guys. I do know I have to go in a moment. I think we're going to cap it at 90 minutes. Let's see. Okay, so this is okay. So that's what I saw. Joe Moorhead beat Ohio State in Columbus when he was the OC at Oregon. Okay, could you get Joe Moorhead? Because Terry Smith and Moorhead had a working relationship, and when they were hiring Andy Kotelnicki, here's a fun one. Back during that time, hindsight's 2020, but apparently Joe Moorhead, I had a family member of his reach out to me, and so I'm disclosing one of my sources. I won't tell you who it was because I don't remember, frankly. A family member of his said, hey, Joe Moorhead would actually be interested in coming back to Penn State. This was while he was at Akron. He would be, but they went with Andy Kotelnicki. Did Moorhead get a fair chance? Were they just saying, hey, he's always wanted to come back to Penn State, right? Was that, and maybe that was just them giving their opinion. But there was, let me just say this. I can say that there was interest from Joe Moorhead returning to Penn State in some capacity. So could you do that? I wouldn't be opposed to that. Terry Smith on a trial basis with Joe Moorhead as your offensive coordinator. That's not a bad idea. You would keep Jim Knowles. You would have to keep Deion Barnes, Dan Connor. You would keep Ty Howell. The coaches you would need to watch: Anthony Poindexter, Phil Troutwine, Marcus Hagans, Danny O'Brien. Would they be fired? Would they, get a contract extension? Would they follow James Franklin? Andy Kotelnicki. Okay, so yeah, Andy Kotelnicki is checked. We replace him with Joe Moorhead. Again, you have to set up Terry Smith. You can't just say, all right, you're the head coach. Go for it. Have fun. Because then he's going to be set up for failure. What exactly? So that's a unlikely timeline, but I'm not opposed to it. I'm really not. Again, year by year basis though. But he's proved to me that, again, Terry Smith has proved to me that he can handle this. Thrown into the fire, first time starting quarterback, and Penn State's offense is better and Penn State's defense is better. Objectively, they look significantly, they look so much different from those games against UCLA and Northwestern. They still have their shortcomings. You can see it in real time, but they've closed the gap significantly. They took major strides. Terry Smith knows what he's doing. Okay. What does home run hire mean? Why was Mike Elko a home run hire? Why would Kalen DeBoer be a home run hire? So this is how I interpret it. When I say home run hire, I mean that this is like you're swinging for the fences. This is why you make the risk and fire. This is why you take the risk and fire James Franklin in hopes that you get somebody that is significantly better. They're well established. They're proven winners at every level. Kalen DeBoer took Washington to a national title, lost, but he took him to a national title. That's better than Penn State's done. Mike Elko has a national title contending team. I also like that he's from New Jersey and he graduated from the University of Pennsylvania. He's a Central PA guy. That's a home run hire, is checking the box, is significantly improving off of what James Franklin had. And Elko and DeBoer are not risks. There is risk with hiring Brian Daboll. There's risk with hiring Brian Hartline. There's risk with hiring Eli Drinkwitz. There's risk with hiring, just pick a name, Brent Key. You do not, when I say home run hire, there's risk if you promote Terry Smith. A home run hire means that you're guaranteed the runs. You're guaranteed significant improvement without the abject risk. Mike Elko and Kalen DeBoer check a ton of boxes that not all these other candidates, they're established. That's why it's a home run. That's why I would say that. I would take Terry Smith, but it would hurt the next few years in recruiting. I mean, would it? I mean, he's a Pennsylvania guy. He has the Pittsburgh pipeline. That's him. That's all him. All him. The reason they had that 5-star wide receiver committed, I'm blanking on his name right now. That was all mostly Terry Smith. That was not Marcus Higgins. Khalil Taylor. That's who it was. Just needed a moment. Khalil Taylor was committed because he's a Pittsburgh guy. Terry Smith led that recruitment with Marcus Higgins helping out. That was all Higgins. Appreciate that. Really do. No, we're just talking ball. We're just talking ball. Terry Smith plays for a great typo in there. I don't want to try to misinterpret it. Terry Smith to get the job at Penn State. Again, not opposed to it. Not opposed to it. It's not Penn State's best option, but it is a option. Terry Smith has shown that he is an option for Penn State. Yep, Mike Elko's 34-16 as a head coach. How is 34-16 not a risk? Okay, let me look up Mike Elko, since we want to say that he's not risky as a head coach. I mean, at Duke, okay, so he was 9-4 at Duke and then 7-5, and then Texas A&M hired him. He was 8-5 in his first year in the SEC, and then 10-0. He's 34-14, just to split hairs with everybody. He's 10-0 at Texas A&M. He proves that he can win and win instantaneously. Like if you're 10-0 at Texas A&M in year 2, like come on. That's not a risk. As we all know, James Franklin cannot win the big game. Okay. Terry Smith played for Joe Paterno at Penn State. Yes. Terry Smith's a Penn State guy. He bleeds blue and white. I think that matters in this coaching search. That is leverage that Terry Smith has. You would take Urban Meyer in a heartbeat, but the rumors say otherwise, that Penn State and Pat Kraft did not want Urban Meyer. Just thinking we would get the he's washed brand. Maybe that factored into it. You want to know what's ironic about all of this? Clark Lee, who's at Vanderbilt, I'm not saying that he's a legit candidate. Well, I'm here to tell you that he's not a legit candidate, because the word is that the powers that be at Penn State don't think the optics would be good for the university to hire another Vanderbilt coach. And that's one of the reasons he's not as strong of a candidate. He's there, but the understanding is that he's going to stay at his alma mater because he's a Vanderbilt alum. I just think that's but that's what I mean. So you say, well, it would bring the brand of he's washed, he's old, he's outdated, he doesn't fit in with the times. Clark Lee at Vanderbilt because he's at Vanderbilt and James Franklin was at Vanderbilt, that's why, no, that's not a good hire. Could we get a Lincoln Riley from Oklahoma to USC or Brian Kelly to LSU type of hire, something totally unexpected? I would say the only option is Kalen DeBoer. And there's that 5%. It's not likely, but it is a 5% chance type of situation. I would say Kalen DeBoer. Penn State is still, they're kicking the tires on Marcus Freeman. They still have Marcus until Marcus Freeman tells them no. Marcus Freeman is on their board. Marcus Freeman, Mike Elko, Curt Cignetti, Kalen DeBoer were all their first phone calls. Curt Cignetti re-upped. Mike Elko's getting ready to. Kalen DeBoer doesn't have as much security and stability. Let's just say that. I don't know how Alabama, the institution, feels. All I know is Alabama fans don't seem completely sold on the idea of Kalen DeBoer. And Marcus Freeman doesn't have an extension with Notre Dame. So again, until those people say no, Penn State's going to say, okay, well, you're not telling us no. You don't have an extension, so you're still on our board. So Marcus Freeman and Kalen DeBoer are those coaches that they're swinging for. Kalen DeBoer, I put Marcus Freeman. I don't see Marcus Freeman leaving Notre Dame unless it's for an NFL job or Ohio State. I don't see him leaving for Notre Dame or from Notre Dame. But so Kalen DeBoer would be that Lincoln Riley type of hire where it's, whoa, that's crazy. That's unexpected. And Penn State can do it. There's this weird perception around Penn State that they can't do this, that they can't go and land a big fish. Because even though Jim Knowles didn't work out, or at least in the short term, right? The Jim Knowles experiment will be classified as a failure right now because it got James Franklin fired. It got, and he hasn't been great. But let's not act like Penn State can't make a big hire. They can't land a big fish. Ohio State people at the time were saying, you're in a fantasy land. You're dreaming if you think you're hiring Jim Knowles away from us. You're crazy. And then I'm getting text messages. Message boards are blowing up saying, oh, Jim Knowles is getting ready to, right? Let's not pretend like Penn State can't hire a big name. They went out and they got Jim Knowles and made him the highest paid defensive coordinator. They fired James Franklin with the knowledge that they might have to pay him $50 million in a buyout, if he doesn't take a job. So that's what I'm saying, is that Penn State's not, they don't have to settle. Could they? Would they? Will they? Potentially. But it doesn't mean they have to. There's this weird understanding from the national perspective that Penn State is a C-tier job or no better than a B-tier job. This isn't a top 10 job, even though it is. It's literally a top 10 job, objectively speaking. It's a fringe top 10 job, but it's a top 10 job. It's a destination job. So Drinkwitz, that's my prediction. And you might not be wrong. Based on what I had a source tell me, Drinkwitz is the favorite. Not an overwhelming favorite, but the favorite as we sit here today. In the middle of November, Drinkwitz would be the favorite. But then I talked to my counterpart at Missouri, and they're surprised that I tell them that. I say, hey, like Drinkwitz is apparently the leading candidate. He's like, really? He was surprised. He was confused. He's like, everything that I've heard is that everything's great between Drinkwitz and Missouri. Strange that guy on the ground in Missouri is hearing something completely different, right? A&M student here. Okay, welcome. They took too long because the Board of Regents needs to approve negotiation and they meet once a month. Penn State never had a chance. Darn it. A guy can believe, can he? But no, this is why we get to the, if I knew that, then I'm not going to put as much stock into Elko. But Penn State definitely wanted Elko. Penn State was willing to give Elko whatever he wanted, but yeah, good on Texas A&M for taking care of, he is a top 5 head coach in all college football, and they're going to pay him as such. Why not Pat Fitzgerald? I don't want to finish on this. I don't. I am. Let's see. Pat Fitzgerald. Well, he didn't really, obviously he was fired from Northwestern for those accusations. The optics would look terrible with regard to Penn State for obvious reasons, right? So that's kind of where I put that with Pat Fitzgerald. Is he was fired because of a scandal, right? Penn State dealt with its own scandal not too long ago, a decade plus ago. So that's why Pat. I don't think Pat Fitzgerald is. I'd be surprised if Pat Fitzgerald gets picked up by anybody. He might get picked up by maybe a Group of 5 school potentially, but I don't think he's landing or he might get back as a defensive coordinator somewhere. I don't think he's landing a big time job anytime soon, like an SEC or a Big Ten job. I don't think he's going to. Keep getting told Eli Drinkwitz is coming. Same thing. I've been told by a source that, hey, get ready to learn Eli Drinkwitz, buddy. That's what. So we'll see. We'll see. He's the favorite, but I need to see it happen. It's all rumors at this point. It's all rumors. And where does that information come from? Just because I have a source tell me it and I trust that source, where is that information coming from? Love to see Terry on the player's shoulders like Joe Paterno. Any coach that says Joe's name a few times and doesn't ignore the whole situation will get money. That's always been kind of the debate of what Penn State's the donor, the booster support is, right? I've always kind of gauged that as a 50-50 split, that there is a portion of the Penn State donor base that is hesitant because the university doesn't give homage to Joe Paterno. They don't recognize Joe Paterno in the way that they think they should. So let's see. They are wrong. Who's wrong? Tell me who's wrong. Will Stein, great offensive mind, great recruiter, awesome energy. That has my signature. I would take Will Stein as the head coach. Do you think the New York Giants coach who just Brian Daboll, if he would be a good fit for Penn State? You don't know until you hire him, but I go back to this bottom line. You need to get somebody that's different. You need to get somebody that brings you something different. Brian Daboll would bring something different to Penn State. Could that be a complete failure? Yeah, it could. But also at the same time, it means that you could also get the other end of those results and he could raise the bar. I'm looking for somebody to move the bar. If it does end up being a failure, you made a mistake in the hire, let the chips fall where they may, so to speak. From what we have heard, it's going to happen by December 1st. Okay, so Eli Drinkwitz is going to be the head coach by the end of November. Drinkwitz just signed a contract extension in July. Just don't see him leaving the SEC. No, again, it's to be determined. To be determined. All right, everybody. As you can see, I've gone well over 90 minutes. Like I said, wanted to just do this Q&A, talk with all of you in the live chat, just chat football, just chat ball. So that is where I'm going to wrap this up. Appreciate each and every one of you for joining me on the live show on a Saturday night. A lot of good college football going on. Enjoy it, watch it, and we'll talk about everything as the news rolls in. We do this daily. We talk about football. We'll talk about wrestling, recruiting, basketball, and hockey as well. All of it's right here on Locked On Nittany Lions. So if you're new to the show, subscribe to the YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcasts for the latest conversations around your favorite Penn State sports teams. Really appreciate all of you for checking out the show, for the support on the channel. It means a ton. Have a great rest of your Saturday night.